Good evening. Our top story this week. A new report finds that parents with disabilities are routinely being targeted by CPS agents and are facing bias and discrimination in parental rights cases all across the USA. In Mississippi, poor parents who receive state assistance for their kids' daycare are now having to run their fingerprints and bioscanners so that the state can track the exact time the kids are picked up or dropped off. In a new pilot program they say will help combat fraud and save the state money. Tennessee is jailing teenage siblings who fight with each other for domestic violence, which has now become the #1 crime in Memphis. And Tennessee's child welfare reform efforts are drawing criticism as the changes are having major implications on the well-being of the children, and they're worried about how millions of dollars are being spent. In Maine, lawmakers are all worked up over a computer glitch that ultimately cost the state more than $10 million in Medicaid benefits that were paid to ineligible people. In New York, some judges aren't satisfied with their 27% pay increase over the next 3 years and are demanding retroactive pay because of salary freeze that started in 1999. And Louisiana gets their adoption bonus money. American researchers find that the younger kids who usually start kindergarten just before or after their 5th birthday are more likely to get ADHD medication. And the system sucks are worried that the government's potential drive off a fiscal cliff could be disastrous for foster children and orphans. The Russian government is accusing the United States of violating the latest international adoption pact between the two countries by failing to share information about a Russian child who was abused in an adoptive home. In Scotland, a foster parent who turned into a sex offender after filming the abuse of 2 girls and downloading tons of child porn gets busted. And the girls, by the way, were only 11 and 3 years old. And in South Africa, a 13-year-old girl who was pimped out by her mother runs away from foster care back to the pedophile ring and then is placed back in the care of the same social worker who failed her the first time. In Canada, a Manitoba child welfare agency that deals with Aboriginal kids is in a state of crisis, set up to fail, and can't keep any CPS agents. A former group home supervisor gets 3 years for sexually assaulting a co-worker. The grandmother of a baby who died in foster care last year releases 350 balloons on what would have been the girl's 2nd birthday. And a Manitoba social worker admits that she probably could have done more to save the life of a little girl named Phoenix Sinclair. In Australia this week, the government has decided to perform an inquiry into the sexual abuse of children in institutions all across the country. A forced adoptee wants to hear those responsible for destroying her family admit that they were wrong for doing so. A mother is suing the Queensland government for lying about the sexual history of a foster child who allegedly raped her 8-year-old son. And an Australian CPS agent was busted for repeatedly molesting a foster child over a 2-year period. In England, a new report claiming that thousands of British children are routinely sexually exploited every year is having its methodology questioned and is considered hysterical by some members of the government. A 15-year-old who wants to live with his mother brings a test case to the Court of Appeals regarding the children's right to be heard in court. And a British foster father is jailed after getting caught with 783 child porn images on his computer. 2 British foster parents have their kids taken away after British social workers decide that they are racist because of their membership in the UK Independence Party, which is now being investigated by the British Education Secretary. Potential adoptive parents are upset over the amount of red tape involved in the adoption process, which drags it out over long periods of time. And judges are saying that the adoption process is being rushed by councils as the Education Secretary tries to cut the time in half. In entertainment news this week, CPS recommends and the judge rules that Modern Family star Ariel Winter's sister will retain guardianship of the actress. And the BBC nears a settlement with Lord McAlpine over false accusations of child sex abuse that were made against him. In California, a family counselor was busted for pimping out a 15-year-old foster kid. In Kentucky, a state social worker is being investigated for child abuse. In Ohio, the 18-year-old who stabbed her foster mother to death last week is charged with murder. And a former Ohio CPS agent gets 3 years in jail for a drunk driving accident that killed a guy on a motorcycle. In Texas, a CPS agent gets 4 years probation for falsely reporting about visits to families that he never made. In Arkansas, 2 women are arrested after an 11-year-old foster kid is burned by being put into a bathtub of scalding hot water that was heated on the stove due to a lack of hot water caused by doing laundry. In Florida, the jury gets the Ryla Wilson case, where a foster mother stands charged with the murder of a foster child who has been missing for 10 years. And in Maryland, a priest who was falsely accused of sexually abusing a child is speaking out about his ordeal. An Amber Alert was issued for an 11-year-old Texas girl when CPS agents tried to snatch her from her mother, who took off with the girl instead, but she was later found found safe and sound in the care of her mother. In North Carolina, a judge is getting set to decide on whether or not a father who is deported to Mexico can have his kids back or if they should stay in foster care and be adopted out. In Nevada, a judge rules that the state can't force a mentally disabled woman to have an abortion. And finally, tonight in New York, school officials are freaking out over a 10-year-old who rides the public bus to school and even ratted the family out to the child protective industry. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.